The Mattel talking dolls are really very good quality dolls. They are very practical and actually economical since they do not use batteries to operate them. The voice boxes are a miniature record player that is spring wound. In this video I will show you how easy these dolls can be repaired. Dolls that haven't said a word in years will talk to you again. With the exception of the talking Barbie, Buffy, Sister, and Baby Small Talk, and all other 11-inch dolls, the Mattel talkers are made the same. The dolls I have listed have smaller components inside them and are much more difficult to repair. I suggest you do not attempt to repair these dolls unless you have a lot of patience and a steady hand. The stuffed dolls with the mechanisms and heads such as Sister Belle and Casper are another type that is hard to repair since you have to split the head open to get to the record. Still, there are many more that can be repaired. The repairs that are in the following video are for the basic talkers such as Singing Chatty, Chatty Baby, Tiny Chatty Baby, Chatty Brother, New Chatty Cathy, and the older Chatty Cathy that does not have the cloth over the holes in the chest for the speaker. On all of the doll records is the name of the doll it goes to and the date it was recorded. So if you're not sure of the doll you are working on, you can tell by that information.
This is the type of Chatty Cathy that we suggest you don't try to repair. It has the cloth over the speaker holes right here. The reason that we suggest you do not try to repair this is that there is a black box that contains all the components. As you can see, the speaker goes right in this area right here. It has a flat cover that goes over this that is part of the box. This one I've cut off around right here in order to get to the inside of it. When the doll was put together, it was put together with a seam right here. With it mounted in the body, it's glued to the one half of the body around this edge. This part right here is down inside the sides of the body where you can't get to it. You have to very carefully try to cut this out. As you can see, the needle is attached right here to part of the speaker band. I've tried to repair several of these and haven't had much success because when you cut this out, you cut out about 1/8 of an inch groove. When you try to put the cover back on, it's too close. The record doesn't want to turn right. You might shift it a little bit when you put it on, and then the record is not straight up and down inside there, and it just doesn't work very good. That's why we suggest you don't try to repair these. Some of the basic tools that you'll need to repair these dolls are a pair of curved tweezers, a pair of flat-nosed tweezers, an X-Acto knife or two with extra blades, a soldering iron, a jar of Vaseline that you use as grease, an emery board, pair of needle nose, some alcohol to clean off the surfaces that may have grease, and optional is the type of glue that you want to use. I have tried using the super glue, which I found does not work very good. Sometimes it doesn't hold together as well as it should. The cement for the plastic models is a real good glue, but it takes overnight to dry. I like to use a hot glue gun when I'm repairing mine, but you've got to be fast with it because the glue doesn't stay hot very long. And last but not least, the main part that you use to repair these dolls with is the O-ring. That part in 99% of all the dolls is what has gone bad. it breaks down and it turns to a sticky rubber compound. To get this compound off of the record and any parts inside the doll, you can use some Comet or other chlorinated bleach type cleaner. It seems to melt the rubber right off of it, but in order to do this you have to take the doll all apart, remove the spring and the string off of it so that you can take it and wash it. The first doll that we're going to repair is a bozo. It's a stuffed type doll. I've already removed the little ring that goes on the string since it takes a while to get off sometimes. And I've already taken the stitching apart, which is the way you remove the box that's on the inside. Now the box has a snap in here, just like on a pair of blue jeans. But it's sometimes pretty hard to get apart. Get a firm grip on the string here and then remove it off the Q-tip. You don't want to let the string go or it'll wind up inside the mechanism, and you'll have to rewind the spring and the string once you get it apart. Almost all of the stuffed dolls and the caterpillars we have a box that is similar to this. As you can tell, this one seems to be slipping on the O-ring. Slip this Q-tip back on there. Okay, now to take this apart, we'll have to break the seam that goes right along this edge all the way around. Now right here you'll note is where the spring attaches. Now you don't want to let this go or that spring will just come unwound up inside there. So you want to be very careful when you take this apart. This pin, when you separate the boxes, is connected to this upper half here and will pull out. The spring is through a slot in the lower half, so it won't go back in as long as you keep it down in the lower half. We'll take an X-Acto knife and usually start in this one, right in this area right here is the best place. Okay, now you can see the spring has started to come out. You need to get it back down in that slot and pull that pin off the top of it. You want to be careful with the string because it's going to try to come in too. Now this is what the inside basically all of the talkers looks like. In the dolls, all of this will be mounted inside half of the body. The speaker, which is right here with the plunger, is mounted in the front half of the doll body. The needle on most dolls is removable. You can take it out and set it off to the side. This is a centrifugal brake. It has felt pads on the sides right here. What happens is when this spins, when you pull the string, it winds this spring up. There's an O-ring, which is what usually goes out in all of these dolls, that goes around the record right here and also around this brake. And as this spins, these little levers are thrown outward. This felt pad rubs around the inside of this housing right here to keep the doll talking at a steady speed. It moves this record, which is right here, which is basically a regular phonograph record made out of plastic. It's just in miniature. The needle has a sharp point right here, which goes in the grooves of the record. It vibrates, which sends the vibrations across this bar right here to this speaker. With this doll right here, the problem is the O-ring is slipping. It's not tight enough. It's got some grease on it or something. We'll let this string go down to that point. Let me make another note while I'm thinking about it right here. On most of these types of dolls or pillow or whatever it was, this part right here is not melted together to hold this little eyelet. It's open, and the cover, the other half, has a pin right about in this area here, which holds that eyelet in there. Now when you take this apart and go to put it back together, you'll have to put this eyelet back in this slot, take the soldering iron and heat up this plastic and fold it over so that it holds that down. If you don't, you're going to have problems. You'll then have to cut off that little pin on the other half of the body in order so that it'll go together. You can also plastic weld. In other words, take a old model car kit or something like that, and it has plastic pieces in it that you can light, and this plastic will melt, and you dab it back and forth over that area, being careful not to get it on the string. Once that cools and dries, you'll virtually have welded that on there. Now, in order to get to this O-ring right here, what we have to do is we'll pull the speaker out, or we'll pull the brake out. Grab hold of the end of the spring right here, and then very carefully lift the record up. Never lift the record up by this part right here. We'll get later on in the video here, we'll get to what's inside this area right here and the reason you don't want to lift it out by this. You want to try to always lift the record out by hanging on to it. Once you get it out, you can hold the spring and the record with one hand. You can see the O-ring is completely loose. It just fell off of the record. The new O-rings will fit fairly tight on there, and then you have to take the flat nose tweezers and pull it out to get it back on. Okay, we need to clean this surface off because it looks like it's got grease all over it in this area. We'll need some Kleenexes to get most of the grease off of there now. Take a little bit of alcohol here and a cotton swab. Clean out this groove the O-ring goes in. We also want to clean our fingers off, since we've been handling this grease. We don't want to get it on the new O-ring, or else it won't do us any good at all. Take some more of this . Okay, in the front of this video, I showed you the O-ring, but I didn't mention what type or size that they are. The type that we use, the manufacturer's name is Stillman. The part number is A036. The compound is 310-70. This information is very important, since you'll have to go to a O-ring distributor in your area to get these. You can look in the yellow pages, and they're usually listed there under seals or O-rings. Now, we'll put this O-ring on the record. Now you can see what a tight fit it is. Place this record back in its place. Get the spring hooked back in. It looks like it's coming wound a little bit. Well, this comes out. It looks like this spring has come unwound a little bit also. It shouldn't have this much play in it out to right here. As you can see, it's extending over the hole where the brake goes. Right in this area right here. So we'll have to tighten the spring up a little bit also. Believe me, you don't want to let one of these go, because you'll have a mess on your hands. Now that looks a little better. The spring is just about out to the edge of the record, maybe a little further. but it'll still have enough clearance for the brake when it's in there. Sometimes you feel like you need about 3 hands to do this with. Now we'll take our flat nose tweezers and we'll work it in here underneath the O-ring. And pull it out. We need to clean the end of the brake off so that we don't get any grease on the O-ring. The O-ring, I don't know if you can see it, but this little round wheel right here has a groove in it. The O-ring needs to be down in that groove for it to be right. This doll is almost ready to put back together. Now we use the Vaseline to put on the speaker right here so that it has a good bonding connection with the needle. Now, we don't want to forget to put the needle back in here either. It's upside down. There. On some of the needles, on some of the dolls, there's a little eyelet in it also that the string has to be fed through. Now on that type you cannot take the needle out of the doll unless you remove the string or unless the string is broken. Now the string can be replaced if it's bad, if it's missing, or if you just feel like it needs a new one. When I first started, we were getting our strings from the Mattel CNCs that we were getting at garage sales and flea markets. Now, they're still a good source for spare parts, but you no longer have to get the string from there. I found out that the string is a basic fishing line, which is a cloth type fishing line that is woven. You can get it at just about any fishing supply store. Like I say, the CNCs are still a good source for spare parts. Basically, the brakes in some of the older CNCs, you can get the springs, needles, and there is a type of speaker in there which, if you get a doll that has a speaker which is tore up, you can manufacture one by using the one out of CNC. Now they're not the same size. The one in the CNC is a little bit bigger in diameter. You can cut it out. You can glue tabs onto the edges of it, and in the dolls you can glue it to the doll to make your own speaker. You have to be a little creative sometimes to do repairs like that, but sometimes it's necessary. In some dolls, I've had the holes where the spindle goes on the bottom and or the top that were broken out. And by taking the CNC, it has various pieces of plastic that have holes on it. When you take it apart, you can saw a piece out that's the right size, file down the one on the inside, and glue it in its place to make a new spindle hole for the record. Okay, we're going to put this doll back together to see if it works. Now, you never glue it back, the front half back on, until you test it, because there may be something else wrong with it that you don't know about. got it back together.
Just keep laughing. Just keep laughing.
As you can tell, Bozo sounds like he's talking just right.
Hi! What are you doodly-doo-doo-doing? Jiminy Kazooks! Yowee Kazooie!
It doesn't sound like there's anything else wrong with this particular doll, so we need to glue it back together and reinstall it in its body, and it will be repaired. In order to glue it back together, I'm going to use the hot glue gun. It's going to take a minute to warm up here. Now, if you prefer to use the contact cement or the super glue, you can do so. With the hot glue gun, you don't have to take it all the way apart. All you need to do is make a crack about this wide where you can start the glue in there and then close it. And then come down here and start to glue in again and come on around. With the contact cement or the super glue, you have to take it completely back off. And with the super glue working very quickly, you have to run a bead all the way around and then get it together real fast and hold it for 10 seconds. The contact cement won't take, you don't have to do it that fast, but it's a little messier, and you would have to probably tape it together here and across this side right here. Either tape it or use rubber bands to hold it together overnight so it'll dry. And the next day you'll be able to reinstall it in the body. The next thing we'll go to is one of the basic talking dolls. While we're waiting, on the Chatty Cathys, we showed you the one that we recommended that you didn't fix. There is another type which has a paper speaker in it, just like the one we showed you there. It can be repaired because it has the basic setup on the inside as the later ones do, except that the paper speaker is attached to the needle. We don't have one to show you, but if you ever run across one, you'll know. There will be no cloth over the speaker holes, and you will usually see a red speaker on the inside of it, which is paper. Now, it can be repaired in the same manner that these are repaired. Let's see if our glue gun's hot yet. It is. It's ready to go. Get a little bit of glue started right in here. Push it together to hold the basic part while we're waiting for the rest of it. The hot glue gun here is a little messy, so it's best to have a Kleenex handy to get the glue as it oozes out the end. Either that or have a piece of paper to set it on. Okay, we'll finish gluing the rest of the body together here. once this glue dries, you can cut the excess off with the X-Acto knife. Right in this area, you can see it stays sticky for quite a while. Always, once you're finished, even with gluing, check it again.
Hi! What are you doing?
Okay, this is ready to reinstall back inside of the body, and you'll have a repaired bozo. What we're going to repair now is a tiny chatty brother. The tiny chatty baby is his twin sister. They both look alike, with the visual differences of only one item if it doesn't have clothes. If it has clothes, you'll be able to tell by the writing on the front of it. But the tiny chatty brother has got a part right down the side of his hair. As far as what he says, he has 2 or 3 different phrases that he says that tiny chatty baby does not have. One of them is shake hands. Another one is dada for daddy, where his sister says mama. Now this is the basic doll. All of them will have the same insides. The first thing that you have to do is remove the head. On some of these dolls, the head has gotten hard and very stiff. You have to pry the head off like that. Now, as you can see, this piece is bent up. It'll go back in place, but it's just not as soft as it used to be. Now, on this particular doll, we have a solid end plate. On some of the larger dolls, it's hollow and you can see down inside of it. This makes no difference at all. On some of these type of dolls where the head is hard, it will tend to break this ridge that is right here off. You want to be very careful. There's usually nothing you can do about it, but you want to be very careful to break as little as possible on there by prying and twisting the head at the same time. If it does break, you'll kind of twist it off of there and leave most of it intact. As long as there's at least 3/4 of this ridge left, when you put the head back on, it'll stay on. If not, you'll have to try to glue this edge back on and try to get it to stay there when you put the head back on. Usually this isn't much of a problem. Now, in order to remove the arms and the legs, you have to split the body apart. You can't just pull them out because they're, as you'll see when we get it apart, it has ridges on the inside. The first place you want to start to take this head apart is up at the top. Since you can't see this part right here, it doesn't matter if you mess it up a little bit getting it started. Sometimes a pocket knife will work better to start this, taking this doll apart. As you can see, I just bent my X-Acto knife. This X-Acto knife, I've heated it up to melt some plastic with. We'll get a new blade and put it in there, and then we'll continue. Be very careful with these X-Acto knives so you don't cut your finger off. I was repairing a doll one time and it slipped and sliced my finger open pretty good. Now, as you can tell, we've got it started right here, and there's a crack started going down towards the arm. Sometimes the best way to do this is to get the X-Acto knife in there, then take a pair of pliers and carefully tap down the edges. Getting a little bit ahead of myself here. First of all, what we should have done is check to see what was wrong with the doll. Now, as you can tell, the voice sounds all right until it gets to a certain point and there's a growling, which in some cases it works all right, and other times it doesn't. Now we'll show you. This is another common problem with these dolls. The O-ring is the most common. Now in any case, if you take a doll apart to repair anything in it, even if the O-ring sounds good, you should go ahead and replace it, since it hasn't had a new one in it since the doll was made brand new. If you don't, you'll end up having to take the doll back apart to put the O-ring in anyway. So it's cheaper with these O-rings only costing about 50 or 60 cents to go ahead and replace it while you're in there. Okay, we'll continue taking this doll apart. Sometimes you can start a crack starting to come apart by prying on the arm just a little bit, right in this area right here. It'll also work for taking the side apart right here. And we'll continue to get this doll apart on this upper crack by inserting the knife here. You want to be very careful not to force it too hard, or you'll make gouges into the side of the body. As you can see, which it occasionally happens, a piece of plastic has come loose. You'll have to tell your customers that this can occur if they want the doll fixed. You can't really guarantee a straight break all the way across. Now, as you can tell, I've got it apart. When we glue it back together, this piece will go right back into place fairly well, and it won't look too bad. This one is apart up to that point. Next, we're going to start under the arm. You can either pry the leg to start it down there, which that one won't do, or start it right here. try the other side. If you can get one side apart, the other side will usually come apart by prying apart on the bottom. Let's see what we can do. As you can tell, this side popped apart very easily, all the way down to the arm. Usually the hardest thing about fixing these dolls is getting it apart. On some dolls, they bring them to you and they're already broke apart from rough use or not enough glue when they were manufactured. This one was really put together good. One reason I'm having so much problem getting this one apart is because I have to keep it in front of the camera so that you can see what I'm doing while I try to take it apart. If I could hold it closer to me where I could work with it, it would be a little bit easier. Now we've got it apart on one side and partway down the other, partway on the other. Now to get the bottom apart, usually just pulling the legs apart and get it. But on this one it was glued very good from the factory. Which is rare for right in this area. Usually it's already broke apart from kids playing with it and pulling on the legs. Now we have it apart at the bottom. We have it apart on one side and the bottom, and you can very carefully pry the body apart a little bit. The snap that you heard was a pin that was over on this side that was breaking. As you can see, the pin right in this area, right here, goes into this slot. Okay, we can remove one of the arms and one of the legs. You can see the groove where the leg fits in there. The arm is just like it. Now we can very carefully work the other side apart to get it loose the rest of the way. And it falls apart. In the previous section, I told you about the speaker. It has the plunger and the speaker mounted around here. Now, if some kids have taken something and poked through the front, through the holes, and tore the speaker up, you can use the speaker out of a Mattel CNC to make your own. What you have to do is finish cutting this one out to get a clean edge. It's glued in along the edges right here. You can take an X-Acto knife or a seam ripper used in sewing to take the speaker out of the CNC. It'll be bigger than this right here. You can take and cut it down to size. You'll have to take some tabs and glue it onto the edges, say in 4 places, to create these ridges. It'll serve in place of these ridges. These ridges are here so that the speaker has some flex to it, so when the vibration from the needle is transmitted to here, the speaker will vibrate to make the sound. The tabs will also serve the purpose of gluing the new speaker onto here. You'll get creative as you do more of these dolls and figure out different ways to do things which may be better than my way or anybody else's. It's whatever suits you. We'll set this off to the side right now and go to this. And what you have here is a frame. This area right here, all the way down to here, to the needle. Now with this needle, it cannot be removed. This needle has a spring, a post right here with a spring that holds it down. It also has an eyelet right here in the end of it that the string goes through the center of. Now with this type of doll, unless you have to remove the speaker to clean it, to clean the O-ring off of it, you don't have to take the string loose. With this one, the O-ring is still in one piece, so it hasn't melted and it will be no problem to fix it. What causes the growling is right in this area and in this area. The brake is inside of this housing. The stem of the brake, the spindle, sticks up through a hole which was served as a bearing. The same with the record. It has a spindle that sticks up through a hole. Now that's served, I don't know if you can tell with me holding it, but there's a little bit of play in this hole. That is what causes the growling. When you pull it and it starts turning, the thing starts vibrating back and forth and creates that noise. It transmits it all the way to the speaker. Also, underneath is a spindle that sticks into the body. That also may be worn out to let the whole record move around. What we'll have to do is I'll plug in the soldering iron right now so that when we put the doll back together, we can heat this area up to to make it tighter. Also this area. If we have to, we'll heat the bottom area to make the hole smaller. Right now I'll plug in my soldering iron so it can be heating. Now, while we're waiting on that, we've got to get this apart. Take this frame off of the body and get it loose from the record and the needle so we can replace the ogre. Now this frame is held on by 5 posts. There's one at the very back right here. There's one down in this side right in here, in this area. There's one on the other side right down in this area. And there's 2 up here at the front. One right in this area, and one over in this area right here. These 2 we usually break off. They're the last 2 that come out, and we usually just break them off. These 3 back here at the back, sometimes 1 or 2 of them are not glued. We'll take an X-Acto knife and start with this one in the very back and try to work it in underneath the edges of it and pry it up. Okay, now this one is glued, so we're going to have to cut it with the X-Acto knife. We just cut through it with the X-Acto knife to where it will come out. This one over here to the edge, we'll get the X-Acto knife in here and try to pry it up. Now this one was not glued very good, so it's coming up. Now we'll try the same on the other side. It too was not glued very good, so it will pry up. And we can pry this whole end piece up off of everything. You can try these 2 up here at the front. It's best if they will come loose to pull them out rather than breaking them off. But usually you have to end up breaking them anyway. Which will be the case. In this case, we'll have to do it anyway. To break them off, you'll just very carefully lift the back up and putting your thumb up here in the front, put pressure on this so that it breaks these 2 pins off by lifting that up. Being very careful not to let the spring unwind. Okay, we have this piece loose. Now we cannot remove it because the string is attached to the needle, which is attached to this frame. On some dolls, the needle will, if it comes off, even though it is attached to the string, it will come off, and you can set this frame off to the side. And in some cases, the needle is not attached to the string, so that it will still come loose. In most cases, though, the string does go through part of the frame right in this area, so you can't get it out anyway. Now, the spring is attached around a pin right here with 2 pins on either side of it where it's looped to hold it in place so it doesn't come straighten out and come loose. Like the other one, take the brake loose and set it off the side. You need to always check the pads to make sure that they're in good shape and still there. I have taken some apart where the pad was completely gone. In a case like that, you'll have to use a spare brake that you have in stock from parts dolls or CNCs, or you'll have to glue some new felt pads onto the existing brake. Now you have to be careful when replacing the brake with another one, because these spindles, which are right here, spindle tips, and right here at the top, on some dolls are different sizes. Also, if you replace the brake, you need to try it when you're through with all your repairs before you glue everything back together. As always, you need to try it, because some of these weights are a different weight with spring tension on it, and if it's too weak, as it spins, it'll spread apart easier and slow the doll down too much, and then the voice won't sound the same. If they're too tight, it'll spin faster before they spread apart, and the doll will sound like the voice is too fast. Usually, most of the weights are about the same. I haven't had much of a problem with that, but I need to warn you about it so that you'll know in case that happens. Now this is where you need 3 hands to do all this work. We'll get an O-ring ready, a new one. Set it off to the side. You'll have to hold this piece off to the side with your fingers and get a hold of the spring and pull it up out of there. Being very careful to lift the record out by the edges of it, not by the pulley where the string is wound up on it. We'll remove the old O-ring. This one does not look greasy. The O-ring was just old and worn out. There is grease on this spindle point, so when you put the new O-ring on, you need to be very careful not to touch that with the O-ring, or else you'll get grease on your new O-ring. You don't really want to wipe that grease off unless you're going to put some Vaseline back on it. We've got the new O-ring on in place. This bottom spindle doesn't look too bad. So we're going to set this back in place, and we'll try just fixing the top one to see if that stops the growling noise. You need to re-hook the spring back in its place. And once you do that, you're usually alright. It usually won't come loose from right there. Okay, on the brake, it is best to go ahead and wipe off the end of it. Make sure there's no grease on it. If you want, we can take and put a little bit of Vaseline with a cotton swab in this hole for the brake, so that when you reinstall it in there, it will be lubricated. You want to be very careful that you don't have too much there so it doesn't get on the new O-ring. We'll take our flat-nosed tweezers, work them in under the O-ring. don't suggest you use a sharp pair of tweezers for this because you might accidentally cut the O-ring a little bit, and then it won't last very long. Now you get it in the groove on the record or on the brake and push the brake in position. Now here again, with this doll, you see there's a little white pulley right here to the side. When you put the O-ring around the brake and put it in its hole, the O-ring needs to go in this groove of this plastic pulley in order to guide it right. Usually, once you get it in there, it will sit pretty close to in place. When you put this frame back on, it will spread them apart a little bit to get the proper distance and get them straight up and down. Now then, we're going to put it back together and try to fix the growling. Now when you put the frame back on, as you can see, the pin is not all the way down. That's because the spring has gone up underneath this frame. You'll have to work it back under like it should be. Now it's back down to where it should be, or close enough, until we glue it. Now you can test it by putting that frame back on and just slipping the body back in place. Okay, we still have the growl, but the voice sounds about like it should be. Okay, the soldering iron should be plenty hot by now. What we'll need to do is pull the record back towards the brake and very carefully heat up the front part of this plastic. While it's still warm, you can push it back to try to close up all the gaps that are in that area. You might have to do this 2 or 3 times, or even take new plastic, light it, and melt it in around this area. Put new pieces in there by dabbing it on there as it's burning. Then blow it out and let it cool. Of course, you'll have to hold it back all this time because you want it to have a tight area in which to turn. Okay, this one is cooled off, and it's helped some as far as the record movement. Now the brake housing is a little bit loose, but we're going to try it with the speaker on it to see if we've done any good. Okay, it's still doing it. This one is pretty tight now, so we need to go to the brake and try to tighten it up. And we'll melt plastic all the way around the brake housing to get it up close. It's cooled off, and if you can see what we've done, we've gone all the way around it, pulling that plastic in towards it to tighten it up. It appears that we fixed the problem with this one. This particular problem can be very, very hair-pulling experience. I've got them fixed just like they are right now, where you think that you've got it fixed, and I put the doll all back together with the arms and the legs and the head, and then pull the string and it does it again. You have to take the doll back apart and try to fix the bottom ones also. But I tested it about 10 times before I put it together, and then once I got it back together, it still had that problem. Sometimes fixing these dolls can be very frustrating, but in most cases it's just the O-ring that's bad. And this one appears to be fixed. So we'll go ahead and glue it back together, starting with the frame on the inside. When you have a hot soldering iron, you need to set it off to the side, making sure that it doesn't touch anything until it cools off. We'll get the glue gun out. As you can see, I've set it on a piece of paper because you get glue keeps leaking out of it, and you'll have a mess if you don't. We'll let it heat up, and we'll start repairing. Now, while we're waiting for it, I'll show you a few of the spare parts that you should keep on hand. One is some spare springs. A lot of times kids will have tried to give their dolls a bath, which is fine when they're new, but over the years this spring will rust and it loses its tension. And once it loses its tension, it's no good. The doll will not work. Now, I've gained about 10 or 15 springs through the older type CNCs and some old dolls that were just beyond repairing. The body was too tore up or something. You can always find these at flea markets. Sometimes people have got boxes full of them that they'll sell for next to nothing because they're no good for anything else. It's a good idea to save any old Mattel doll for this main reason right here for this spring. You can't get it in anything else. I've even tried clock repair stores, hoping to find some of this type of spring, and I had no luck at all. Here's a break that I took out of a doll. As you can tell, the felt has come off. Now I still save this for pieces and for checking in case I need to repair the part of the plastic where the spindle goes in. I can use this, if it's the same size as the one I've got, to find the right size piece of plastic in a CNC. And what we have here is the little pulley that goes on the record. Now the reason I said not to pull up on this pulley is because when the factory made it, on the pulley, put it onto the stem, they just punched with a special punch some edges to hold this in. And if they're a little bit wore, when you lift up on this, it'll come off just like this piece has. This record and pulley assembly with the long shaft here is out of a Mattel CNC. The reason I save this is because it has a plastic piece right here that holds the pulley onto the shaft. A lot of times, if you do happen to get one of these come off, you can use this piece of plastic by prying it off to hold this one back on. Now the reason that I'm going into this is because very rarely you'll find a problem with a doll where you have a problem with this pulley. As you can see, it spins freely one way. It'll just spin on around, while the other way it stops. The reason it stops is on the back side of this pulley you have some grooves in the side right here. As you can see, they're tapered a little bit to one side and extend out. Now what they have is 3 little needle bearings that fit down in these grooves. Let's see if we can get this one apart to show you what it looks like. As you can see, that little plastic piece just pries right off. You want to save that. When you lift this off right here, you have 3 little bearings. And what happens is these bearings will wear out. They'll either wear these grooves a little bigger, or they'll wear down the edge of this metal where they attach. Now the way this operates, these little needle bearings, when they're off to the deep side of this groove, are loose, and they'll let it spin when you turn it one way. But when you start to turn it the other way, they go to the shallow side of this groove and wedge between this metal and the metal of your pulley to hold it in place. Now if they've wore out a little bit, they'll let it spin on around a little bit, and you can't, when you pull the string out, it'll go back in before the record starts, before it finally catches and the record starts, and you'll miss part of your voice that's on the record. Now to repair this, you get it apart, and you can go to a hobby store and get piano wire. you'll need to take these bearings with you and get one that is just a tiny bit larger than this bearing is right here. You can take this piano wire, which comes in about a 3-foot length, and cut it with a pair of wire cutters with the sharp edges, and you would just, you'll have to ring it or else you'll leave a flat edge. In other words, you stick it in there and you bear down on it just a little bit, and then you loosen up your grip and turn the wire just a little bit, and you bear down on it again. Now you won't be able to cut through piano wire with a pair of pliers like this because it's too tough. But once you get that ring around the edges, then you can take it and you can break it off. When you cut your new bearings, you'll need to check them for size, for length, and then this is the fun part. You'll have to get it started. You can get 2 of them in there. Like that. Start it over the edge of your record. Then you take your curved needle nose pliers, or needle nose tweezers, and work your other one into your groove and drop it in there and push it on. And you've got it back to where it should be. It stops. If you've saved this little piece, when you have it on your regular record, you just push it down on there to hold the pulley in place. Now there are some small star washers, if you can find them, that will serve the same purpose as this, where they have got the grooves, the little pieces of metal to the inside. You can force it down over the spindle and it will stick on there and hold the pulley in place. Now that's how you put that back together once you've got it apart. Generally, when you turn it and try to lock it, sometimes it will move a 1/4 of an inch. That will not hurt you. It's when it will go a 1/2 turn or more before it finally catches a hold is what will hurt you. Our glue gun should be hot enough by now to start gluing everything back together. You want to start up at the front and glue these 2 in place. Put a little dab of glue on one, then the other, and then glue it in place. Those are the most important ones of getting started first. Once you get them in place and set, you won't have any problem with the rest of it because this arm will flex enough without disturbing these pins for you to lift it up and put glue on your back pins. The only problem with the hot glue gun is that it leaves little strands of glue similar to a spider's web all over the place. Once it glues though, it'll just clean right up with no problem at all. It just gets a little messy. Now, in the case of this one, where we had 2 pins that came out, we won't glue those back because when you push them down, they hold very, very tight. But you should always glue the one that you cut. Put a little bit of glue on it. Just so it'll hold it in the right spot. Squeeze a little bit of glue in there and then hold it down until it dries. Now that we have everything glued back together, you should always check it one more time before you get ready to put the doll completely back together. Just to make sure that everything is working right. Now he just said shake hands and hi, Daddy. Those are two of the items that the Tiny Chatty brother says where the Tiny Chatty baby does not. He says he was hungry. Okay, we're ready to put the doll back together. Now if you'll note, all the mechanism is on the back half of the doll. So we'll start with it and place it down on the table. We'll take the legs and the arms and stick them in the right way. And you'll have to note make a note that the feet point up. Also, that the arms bend up. Now I myself had to put these back together and had the arms swapped or the legs swapped and have to take it all back apart again in order to straighten it out. But if you do it like this every time, just like it was looking at you, you won't have any problem. You can then take the front half and put it on, and you've just about got it back together. Now you just have to glue the seams back together. Now with the hot glue gun, you don't have to worry too much about a little spot that's missing here, because the glue will fill in that spot. We'll start with one side and start putting glue in. You want to be careful not to get the glue too close to where the arm is, or when it dries, it will hold the arm in place. Next we'll go to the lower half. And we'll start just below the arm, about 1/4 of an inch. We'll start putting a bead of glue in. And stop at the leg and squeeze it together. Now you need to hold a little pressure while you're gluing it, while the glue is drying, so that it'll seal real good. If you get little strands of glue, you won't have any problem once it's cooled off of coming off. Once that side seems like the glue is set up pretty good, it's not real sticky, we'll go to the other side and glue it. You may have to pry it apart just a tiny bit. You don't want to pry too much or you'll break the glue loose on the other side. On this one you'll have to glue, move the arm out of the way, and you'll have to glue from the top along that edge, skip over the arm and glue that before you press it together, or else you won't be able to get glue in the other part of it. So you've got to be very fast while this glue is still hot. Try to get it finished and get it closed up. As you can see, the glue has oozed out of the cracks a little bit. That's no problem once it dries, once it cools off. We'll save the crack that is underneath between the two legs for the last part after we clean up the doll to glue, since that is the furthest away and you can pry it apart enough to get the glue in there and then press it together. As you can see, it's filled in all the cracks and where there's some plastic that broke loose fairly well. You can always, once you scrape this off, you can always come back if there's still a little bit of a hole there and squeeze a little bit more glue into it to seal it up. Okay, we'll start with the other side since it's cooled the longest and start trimming using a sharp X-Acto knife. Come down the edge, trim the glue off, the bulk of it. Start up here at the top, cut the edges of the glue. You got to be very careful with this X-Acto knife or you'll take gouges out of the plastic, which will show up later. You don't really want to do that if you can help it. All this does is just takes a little bit of practice and you'll have it down in no time. You can practice with some old junk dolls, or with anything. Now we have that edge all cleaned up and it looks real good. The top you're not really worried about because the head will cover that and will also help hold it together there. Now we'll trim this side off right here. Trim the glue off. Now we'll trim it between the arm and the leg. You can see it, we have a little bit of a hole left right here. Take a little bit of the glue, being careful not to touch the tip to the body because the tip is hot enough to melt the plastic. But you want to squeeze a little more glue in place, then use your knife to work it down in that hole. That'll seal it up. If you still have some rough edges, you can either scrape it with the knife or you can use an emery board to file it down. Depending on what your customer wants or what you want, you can take some paints and mix up your flesh colored paint to paint over this edge. Usually if the customer or you are going to have clothes on your doll, it won't be necessary because you won't see this anyway. Usually if I was repairing a doll for a customer and they wanted it painted, I would have to charge extra to mix up the paint and get it the right color and paint this area up. Usually all I did was scrape it or file it down to where it was a smooth surface, and the customer was usually very happy with that. Now we'll fix the one that's on the bottom side. As you can see, it's apart a little bit already. All we need to do is pry it a little bit more. We'll then take the glue gun and spread some glue down inside, being careful to stay away from the edges where the legs are. Spread it apart a little bit to get it down in there, and then close it up. As you can see, this glue threads very easily, like a spider's web. Once it dries, it pulls right off. We'll let that dry before we cut it. Now we're ready to put the head back on. Usually all it takes is to press and rotate the head at the same time, and it'll go on with no problem. Okay, this glue should be dried enough now to where we can trim it away. And you're finished with the doll. Check it. You need to check it one more time. To make sure that everything is all right with it, and you're ready to go. Who we have here is Mattel. Now, due to our length of our tape, we don't have time to take her apart while we show you. She'll come apart the same as any other doll, except that this arm that has the watch on it will not be able to be taken away from the body, because there's a plastic rod that goes up through it and attaches to the record on the inside. We'll be right back with her apart. Okay, we're back here, and we've got the doll apart. As you can see, there's a plastic rod that comes from inside the arm. Now, as you turn the watch here, it twists, and there's a little worm gear that's down inside of here. You can't see it right here, but it turns this record on the bottom side. You can see the grooves there. That is the other part of the gear that it turns. can see it moving there. As we turn this, it turns the record to a certain spot. I believe when they designed this, they have about 3 or 4 scenes for each part of the record for each time. About 4 scenes, 3 or 4 scenes for each time. Now you can see that right here is 6 o'clock. It's 5 till 6. It says on the watch, but that'll be the 6 o'clock time. Then as you turn it, it'll be 6:10, then 6:30. Now, if there's 3 scenes, each scene will probably be different at each one. A lot of times it will do that, and if you leave it just at one setting, it'll jump to the different scenes for that time of day. And then as you come around to 7 right there. Now the only bad part about this, repairing this doll, is if you have to pull this speaker out, you've got to keep the synchronization right between this watch and the record in order to change the O-ring. Now, if it gets away from you when you're taking it apart, once you get it back together, you'll have to set it at the time, at a couple of times, both a click before and a click after, to make sure that you've got it synchronized right. Okay, to see this operate, if you'll watch the record, I'm going to pull the string. Now you see the record moving. Now it will stop right there, but the pulley will keep turning. Now that presets the needle at the right spot, and then when it starts going, it says what it's supposed to. You see it backed up, the record backed up to that point and stopped. You can see it doesn't move much right there. Now we'll change the time a couple times. Now see, it moved quite a ways further. Now it didn't move hardly any at all right then. See, so as you turn this, it presets a different spot underneath. Now repairing it is basically the same as far as the other components, with a few added ones. You have a guard right here that the string goes through. Your needle is right here, is attached to the frame, but it does not have the little eyelet. Now you do have the eyelet on the frame here, and you have an added piece, which is this right here. Now this is part of the record stop. As you pull the string, it pulls this forward, which engages the stop for the record, so it'll stop at the right spot. You have a little nut right here that if you have to set your record to the right spot, you can take this loose and wind this gear out of here, get it loose out of there, figure out where it's sitting on the record, turn the needle to the right spot, and it'll turn that gear, and then work it back in place in there. Sometimes the best way to change this O-ring will be for you to just take this frame loose, get it off, keeping the record in place and the spring in place. Once you get all this over, you will take the spring loose, slip the O-ring underneath the spring, and put it over the top of the record instead of the back of the record, like we did with the other one. You can get a better view right here of some of the extra components that are down inside of here. You can tell that this record base is grooved right here, and you can also see the other part of this record stop. as I move it over here on this side. All I can say is when you take one of these apart is for you to check it and look very closely at it as you take it apart so that you know what you're getting into and how it's supposed to go back. You always want to look carefully. Now the other type of doll that is similar to this one is Peachy and her puppets. Now, Peachy and her puppets holds a puppet in her hand. In her hand there's a hole, and you have a puppet with a certain length of plastic stem that sticks down inside of her. Now she has a cable that goes through her arm with rings inside her hand. When you put that puppet in there with a certain length stem, it goes through 1, 2, 3 of these rings, or however long it is, and then when you pull the string, it pulls the cable tight up to a point where the pin is holding the ring. It then stops the record in the right spot, and there's 2 or 3 phrases where it could stop in that area that it talks about that particular puppet. Now if there is nothing in her hand, she just tells you what her name is and says you can stick a puppet in her hand and she'll tell you about it. These are the basic types of dolls that are different. There is a doll that has her eyes that move, which is the see and say. Now, say and see or see and say. Now, you will hardly ever find anything wrong with this doll, because instead of having the rubber O-ring for a drive belt, she has a plastic band, and instead of a groove in the record, it's like a gear. Also, where the brake is, it's like a gear also, and this band connects the two. So the band does not, it might stretch a little bit, but not very much, and it never breaks down like some of these O-rings do. And so you hardly have a problem with that particular doll. The only thing that might happen is the eyes might have quit moving. There's a mechanism that goes from this right here with a rod up to her head that moves her eyes back and forth. That's about the basic difference between that one. She will almost always talk, but her eyes sometimes will not work. Larry Lion, which is a stuffed animal, his eyes also move, or his mouth rather moves, and he has the same type of O-ring in it, which is a more of a chain type belt, which very rarely breaks or slips. And we'll go ahead and take this one apart, and I'll show you what I mean by slipping the O-ring over the top instead of the bottom. This one is basically the same. You got to try to get the pins either loose or cut them. It holds the frame on. And that one is cut. That one we had to break or cut. It didn't pull out. It was glued in real good. Looks like we'll have to do the same with this one. Looks like they glued these pins in very good. Okay, we got that one loose. Now, as in the case with the other one, okay, now see, you've got to be very careful here. As you can see, my spring has started to come loose and unwind. Luckily, that one piece caught it before it did, before it unwound all the way. I'll get it back in place and then continue. Okay, here again, we're just going to break these front pins by folding this over. As you can see, when the string doesn't go through the needle, it folds out of your way a lot easier. Okay, we'll remove the break, and to be safe, we'll remove this piece. Now then, in order to do it this way, I failed to tell you that you'll have to take the string loose also. Since we don't have much time left on the tape, I'm just going to lift the whole thing up and give you a better look at what's underneath and replace it that way. Before we continue here, I'm gonna wipe a lot of the grease off that's already on here. As you can see, this pulley is on very tight on this one, so I'm going to handle it by it. You can look down inside there and see on yours whether it's in very good or not. Okay, we're going to take the spring loose here and very, very carefully lift the whole assembly up, being sure not to disturb anything underneath. Now all this is loose and I'm holding it down with my finger. You don't want this gear to come loose from the O-ring, or the gear to come loose from the worm gear right in this area here, or else you'll lose your correct synchronization. This area right here. If this comes up and you don't get it set right back in the right spot, you'll have a lot of trouble trying to get it back in the right spot. Now this pulley can set back down here in any place because this little pin that sticks up right here is what catches on the back side of this record to stop it at a certain point where it's supposed to stop. Sometimes it takes a third person, or a second person, a third hand, to work on this doll. So I'm going to have my wife hold this plastic gear down while I replace the O-ring on the pulley. Now with this particular doll, the O-ring was gone. It must have broke and went down inside one of the legs or the arm or something. Now you want to still be very careful not to gain grease on the O-ring. Got the new O-ring on, and I'm going to set the record back in place. Okay, I've got it. back where we should be with a normal type doll. You don't want to forget to put this piece back in because it is a very important piece. It keeps the string winding up on the pulley in the right spot, and as you can see, I've just now spotted it. My spring wound up into where the string is supposed to go, so you need to keep that down. This little piece here keeps that from happening, and also the string from going down into that other area. Okay, we've got it back in place on here. All we have left to do now is to clean off the brake and put it in place. Got to hurry because my tape is almost out of time, but it should go back the same as any other doll, and you always want to check it before you glue anything back together to make sure that there are no other problems. Any kind. Okay, we'll fold all this back over. Stick the front cover back on. We'll set it for 1 o'clock here. We'll have to, since this inside didn't have any pins left on it, we'll have to reach up inside of here and try to hold it in place while we test it. Then to pull on that while we hold it in place.
How would I brush my teeth?
Try it again. Well, it's not working too good trying to hold it in place. You'd probably be better off going ahead and gluing it together. It doesn't sound like anything else is wrong with it. I believe we're about out of time, so I hope this has given you a basic idea on the different problems that you'll have and how to repair them. We appreciate you trying to use this tape to repair your dolls, and we hope you have good luck at it and get a lot of practice. You can also call us if you have any questions, or write us. Our phone number is area code 214-288-9509, and our address is 2510 Bob White, Mesquite, Texas 75149. This is Jim and Linda Clark. Thank you.